Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Anytime a coach leaves in the middle of the season, it's a bit of a chaotic mess. At that point, most of the time, you have to promote someone from within the organization to the interim position, meaning that overnight, that person's responsibilities are changing. It's a weird situation because barring anything crazy, the coaching staff knows that they won't be back, and that everyone's just trying to get through the season at this point. So the last thing any team should want is to completely mess up an already messed up situation by announcing who the interim head coach is, only to realize that the guy doesn't actually want the job. Yet in 1996, when it came to the New Orleans Saints, that's exactly what happened. After Jim Mora resigned as the head coach of the team in what was already a chaotic and well-documented situation, the Saints managed to completely bungle the interim coaching position. It got so bad that it led to other coaches on the team being visibly upset, led to the Saints announcing and then canceling multiple press conferences at the last minute, and led to the replacement coach accepting and then backing out of the job. It was that bad. This is the story of the 1996 Saints, and the craziest coaching controversy in franchise history. Before I talk about the incident in question, we need some context as to understand who the supposed interim coach was going to be, and why he was going to be promoted in the first place. Our story involves a man named Chet Franklin. There is absolutely no footage available of him, so we'll have to settle for footage of the teams he was with and the positions that he held. After starting his coaching career in the collegiate ranks for a decade with the likes of Stanford, Oklahoma, and Colorado, he moved on to the NFL and became the special teams coach of the San Francisco 49ers in 1971. He spent 4 seasons on Dick Nolan's staff in various roles before getting his biggest coaching gig yet, serving as the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs in 1975 and 1976. The offense wasn't terrible under him, as they finished middle of the pack on Paul Wiggins' staff, but he was strangely switched to linebackers coach in 1977, and then was looking for new work after Wiggins was fired. From there, Franklin became the defensive backs coach of the Saints for 2 years, and would then serve for 7 seasons as the defensive backs coach of the Raiders. Franklin was a very solid defensive backs coach, and was on 2 Super Bowl winning staffs. 3 times in Franklin's 7 seasons there, the Raiders finished inside the top 5 in interceptions, and led the league in this category in 1980 when they won the Super Bowl. After the 1986 season, Franklin was offered an administrative role. Following nearly 30 years on the sideline, he was no longer a coach, as he became the director of pro personnel for the San Diego Chargers. San Diego never made the postseason in his 3 seasons at the helm, and after the 1989 season, he had various roles in the World League of American Football, including a position as an assistant coach for Team Dallas, which was a team comprised of backup WLAF players that could get signed at any moment should a player from any of the other teams in the league get hurt. Think XFL Team 9. However, he was back in the NFL by 1994, serving in the front office of none other than the main team involved in our story, the New Orleans Saints. The Saints were definitely on the decline during this point, but how much Franklin had to do with that is minuscule, since he was not the general manager and was not the director of player personnel. When he took the job, he assumed that he was going to stay in an executive role. Little did he know that a few years into his career, he was going to be asked to take on a role significantly bigger and significantly more unexpected than that one. In 1996, Franklin was in his 3rd season with the Saints, serving in the front office. On the field, the Saints were an absolute mess, and that's putting it mildly. After becoming a good team during the late 80s and early 90s for the first time in franchise history, the team was on the decline in the mid-90s, but was still fairly competitive. The same could not be said about the 1996 season, when the Saints started out losing 5 games in a row, with 3 of those losses being by double digits. There was a game against the Cardinals where they had just 218 yards of total offense while allowing 432. And this was the same Cards team that later in the season would lose to the 1-15 New York Jets. There was a game against the Bengals where they had 27 yards rushing on less than 2 yards per carry. And this was the same Bengals team that finished outside the top 10 in every rushing defense category that season. It was ugly. But without a doubt, the ugliest point came right before their bye week, when they traveled to Charlotte to take on the Carolina Panthers in Week 8. The Saints lost the game 19-7. Jim Everett completed less than 50% of his passes. The Saints finished the game with 10 first downs, 174 yards of total offense, and 21 minutes of total possession. New Orleans converted just 20% of their 3rd downs and went 0 for 3 on 4th down. The Saints didn't force a single turnover and were penalized 8 times. There was nothing good about this game if you were a Saints fan. I mean, I guess there was one thing. It did give birth to this iconic press conference.
Well, what happened was that second game, we got our ass kicked, or the second half. We just got our ass totally kicked. We couldn't do diddly poo offensively. We couldn't make a first down. We couldn't run the ball. We didn't try to run the ball. We couldn't complete a pass. We sucked. The second half, we sucked. We couldn't stop the run. Every time they got the ball, they went down and got points. We got our ass totally kicked in the second half. That's what it boiled down to. It was a horse performance in the second half. Horse. I'm totally embarrassed and totally ashamed. Coaching did a horrible job. The players did a horrible job. We got our ass kicked in that second half. It sucked. It stunk.
One day after this iconic rant and this travesty of a game, Mora, after 11 seasons with the team, resigned. No longer was he the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Mora praised his team on the way out, saying they work very hard and this team is very, very close to being a very, very good football team. Then he walked away to the shock of everyone. Mora was supposedly crying to the players when making the announcement. Defensive coordinator Jim Haslett said that he was numb after hearing the news, and owner Tom Benson, who didn't take any questions, said that the decision caught him by surprise. At the halfway point, the season was over, and the team didn't have a head coach. They needed to hire an interim to take them home the rest of the way. And the man they looked at? None other than Chet Franklin. In some ways, hiring Franklin makes sense. By hiring Franklin, you allow everyone else on the team to keep their current position. You don't have to reshuffle anything. The coaching staff can stay exactly where they are, all while the team hires someone within the organization that knows the players and knows their strengths and weaknesses. Plus, Franklin had coached offense, defense, and special teams before, so he could do it all. On the other hand, hiring Franklin seems like a weird move. Not only had the guy never been a head coach at any level before, but he hadn't been on the sidelines for an actual team since 1986, which was so long ago that Jim Mora was a rookie head coach and the Saints had never made the postseason in franchise history at that point. Hiring someone who's been out of the game, relatively speaking, for so long is a bit of a gamble, just because of how much the game changes over a decade. Still, the Saints were all in on Franklin to guide them to the finish line. They were so high on him that literally the day that Mora announced his resignation, they offered him the job. And Mora only announced his resignation in the afternoon, so they moved super quickly on that front. It got to the point where the Saints even sent out a memo to reporters telling them to get to the facility where Franklin would be introduced as the interim head coach for the remainder of the 1996 season. This meeting was premature, as the team spokesperson apologized, saying there is still some fine points being negotiated. We will try to get it done today. Even though there were still some T's to cross and some I's to dot, the message was extremely clear. Chet Franklin was going to be the head coach of the Saints. And to say that the rest of the coaching staff was furious at this would be an understatement. Half of them were shocked, thinking naturally that the interim head coach would be promoted from within. Very rarely are you hiring someone who's not already on the coaching staff to finish out the season. Although the Buffalo Bills tried this with great success in 1986 with Marv Levy. You can learn more about that situation by clicking the card in the upper right corner. The other half were angry, thinking that this executive who hadn't coached in over a decade was now going to be the one calling the shots. One assistant coach, a tight ends coach by the name of Bruce Arians, said that there was no enthusiasm upon hearing the news, saying it's nothing against Chet. We all like him and respect him. I think we just all felt the new guy would come from one of the coaches. And upon realizing this, Franklin decided to withdraw his name from consideration. The Saints had already canceled one press conference announcing that Franklin was going to be the new head coach. They rescheduled said conference for the next day, with reporters and everyone fully expecting this thing to be the real deal. However, once again, it was all for nothing. New Orleans was so dysfunctional that not once, but twice in the span of 24 hours, they held a press conference to announce a new head coach, only for that new head coach to not actually be the new head coach. We were getting dangerously close to a boy who cried wolf situation, where the Saints would actually hold a press conference to announce their new head coach, only for no one in the media to show up. At this press conference, Franklin announced that he was not the right man for the job. He said that he didn't feel like he was going to be that effective, although part of that was supposedly because the team fired offensive coordinator Carl Smith, and Franklin was upset about that. Franklin knew how to read the room. He saw that the assistant coaches weren't thrilled with the news and knew how unhappy they'd be at the entire situation. So as he said, there wasn't a groundswell of assistants searching me out. So I said, maybe this isn't what we really need to be doing. It was a very team player-esque move by Franklin that in many ways can be admired. He never threw his hat into the ring. He was sought out by the team. And even though he seemed excited at being a head coach for the first and what would most assuredly be the only time in his career, when he realized that it would have caused more trouble than it was worth, he backed out. Still, this left the Saints without a head coach, when they thought for sure that they had one. It didn't matter that this was their bye week. For a team to go more than 24 hours without a coach in the middle of the season was absolutely disastrous. This meant over a day without anyone calling the shots or having any structure whatsoever, or anyone game planning. Finally, after this entire debacle, the Saints were able to get an interim head coach, promoting linebackers coach Rick Venturi to the position. Venturi had head coaching experience at Northwestern and with the Colts, and had tons of experience as a defensive coordinator. If this was the move made from the start, no one would have batted an eye. But after announcing on multiple occasions a press conference to name Franklin the head coach, only to say just kidding afterwards, you can probably guess that the rest of the season, much like this coaching search, was also a disaster. Was 1996 the worst season in franchise history? Not at all. Not when the 1980 season where they went 1-15 exists, and not when the 2005 season where real-life tragedy took over exists. However, it was absolutely one of the worst seasons in franchise history, and the second half went just as poorly as the first half did. Rick Venturi could not right the ship, as in the 8 games that he coached, the team went 1-7. New Orleans finished that season with an abysmal record of 3-13, hosting the second worst offense in the league. Whether it was Mora or Venturi in charge, the Saints were an atrocious football team that were the worst team in the NFC and the second worst team in the NFL for very good reason. As for what would happen to Franklin afterwards, he stayed on in the front office for a few more years before joining the Oakland Raiders in their front office in 1999. He stayed with the Raiders for a few seasons, and even made it to Super Bowl 37 as a front office member, but after a lengthy career in the game spanning nearly half a century, he hung it up in the 2000s. Franklin had done just about everything in football by this point. He served in the front office and on the sidelines. He won a few Super Bowls as an assistant. He gave practically his entire life to the game in a bunch of different areas, both on and off the field. But there was one thing that he never got to do, and that was become a head coach, even if it only would have been for a few games. What happened in 1996 with Franklin and the Saints was nothing short of bizarre. Franklin had a golden opportunity that just about everyone at that level dreams of, and he declined not once, but twice, even after the Saints announced the press conference announcing him as the new head coach of the team. For all of this to transpire in the middle of the season the way that it did, it doesn't get much crazier and much stranger than that. Get your official Jaguar Gamer 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 PM Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters helping with the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.